I have a quote on my desk that says, "Nothing great was ever accomplished without enthusiasm." So thank you for your enthusiasm today in that kind introduction. These opportunities bless me to have the chance to talk with you about faith journey. And every time in the preparation, I'm struck by how God shows me and reveals to me something new and something different as I approach the chance to talk to you. And so lately, I've been reading a book that I highly recommend. I read a book a week. That's one of my faults. But it's called 1,000 Gifts. And I just want you to hear the subtitle, A Dare to Live Fully Right Where You Are. A dare to live fully right where you are. I think I need those words engraved on my forehead. And I imagine some of you, any type A personalities out there? Just somebody, please. Thank you. She talks about, her name is Ann Voskamp, the writer, talks about learning to recognize the gifts that are right in front of us. Literally watching a bird in flight. When's the last time you did that? I don't even know there's a sky. So she's challenged me as I've prepared for these remarks to be far more attentive about where I am and what God is doing in those places and what God's creation looks like and what sounds are made when the wind blows and things that frankly are lost on me most days. So I come to you with a very contrite heart to this point that I don't always appreciate what God's doing in the moment. And I want to come to you today as much in the moment as I can be, speak from my heart about my experiences, that they might provoke some awareness in you about what God's doing, where He's at work. A lot of people ask me when I do this, would you please share your story of when you gave your life to Christ? That's probably the most common way I'm asked to speak to Christian audiences, right? Does that sound familiar? But I want to turn the question upside down today because I'll share that answer at some point, but I really want to share with you all the life that's been given to me by Christ. I want to flip it around because that's my story. I'm going to talk about 4 aspects of my journey. The first, family, which is the foundation of everything you're going to learn about Cheryl today. The second, my faith journey, some of the specifics of that. The third, trials, the most important thing I'm going to talk about to you today. And then lastly, my passion for workplace ministry. But I'm going to start with the story of my family because everything about my life story starts there. I was raised not just by 2 great parents, deeply committed to family. That certainly was one blessing. But I had also the blessing of knowing both sets of my grandparents. And they played a huge role in my upbringing, particularly my 2 grandmothers, strong, faithful women. And through the stories that they shared with me over many, many years and the scripture that they read into my heart, I have been incredibly blessed by the gift of my family. I would tell you the scriptural verse that just kind of explains it all to me is Luke 1:50. His mercy extends to those who fear Him from generation to generation. And those words just echo for me. You see, my great-grandfather, who's kind of the first guy I knew in the chain, he was a fabulous father to 5 children after my great-grandmother died at a very young age. He was a good businessman. He was known in his community for being helpful to others, and especially those who worked for him. My great-grandfather was helpful to my grandfather because my grandfather was orphaned at the age of 15, and he met my great-grandfather, and he came to work for him, and he taught him everything about being a great farmer and committed person in the community. And Jack fell in love with the youngest daughter, my grandmother. So Jack and Bertha married at 19, and they had these 3 lovely boys. There were a lot of boys in our family up to that point. The oldest of those boys was my father, Max. So Max was raised by these God-fearing parents as a result of my great-grandfather. His family was active in their church and community, in the church that my great-grandfather built. He was a respected dairy farmer. He made a good living, and his boys were the first generation to all three go to college. So then Daddy Max, as I called him, he goes to college and meets my mother, who has also been raised by Christian parents, loving, hardworking, God-fearing people. They were married in 1954. My parents had 4 children. I'm the oldest of those 4. They raised all 4 of us to be believers in Christ. They didn't miss a beat. They didn't miss a kid. And interestingly, strangely, they also raised all 4 to become CEOs of businesses in the United States. That's weird. So what I would tell you about that is it wasn't just about education. You know, a lot of people focus on getting their kids a great college degree, and we have those. But the more important thing is we were well raised by our parents who understood their most important role in life was to love us, to teach us faith, to model good values in our actions, and to encourage our talents and gifts. My parents told us we could do anything we felt compelled and called to do. Never said what it would be, just said go do what you're compelled and called to do. I can tell you that this is why I believe in multiple generations, that Christ came well before me in the lives of these people I've just described before you, and I am incredibly indebted to those people for my upbringing and my foundation of faith in Christ. That was a remarkable gift. People prayed years before my birth that there might be generation after generation of believers in our family. That has made me a passionate believer in family. I can't think of any more important purpose for family than that, to create generations of believers for the times to come. So that's what my husband and I are trying to do. We are married 31 years. We have 3 daughters getting old. They get older every year, and so do we. Haven't quite figured that out. But we have attempted to develop their lives as faithful believers and, yes, well-behaved children. But we've also let aunts and uncles and grandparents invest in them and develop them and bring along their faith. And that is why the 2 oldest are deeply faithful believers today. I'll tell you about a third in a minute. So first part of the testimony is that faith and comes from family for me. It was a powerful foundation. But as soon as I say all that, I want to acknowledge that I am very, very aware that not everyone gets that foundation of family. And I'm very aware that the faith road is more difficult without it. And I will tell you a real short story about a young man that I work with. He tells a story about his family that you just are awestruck by how bad it was. Okay, just dysfunction after dysfunction. And I said to Tony, Tony, you have a lovely family and wife, and you're a faithful believer. I said, how did you come to this place in your life? And he said, well, Cheryl, I didn't know what I was running to, but I sure as heck knew what I was running from. Isn't that good? And it led him to choose to become the first family generation in his family to be nurturing young believers in the faith and creating a different generation for times to come. So that's my encouragement to you, is that each of us has that opportunity to be the first generation of family. So part 2, a little bit about my faith journey, where it began, kind of where it's taken me. My faith story begins in 1969. I know that some of you weren't born yet, but I'm trying to get over that. I came to accept Christ in what I think you would call a very conventional way, an ordinary way. I went to confirmation class at my church. I had a very good youth pastor, and through his teaching and his bringing along of that class, I confidently stood before my church, gave my testimony, and declared my faith in Jesus Christ. And I know it was a young age and that I had a lot to learn, but I will tell you it was a very important and memorable time that did begin my journey with Christ. It is where I learned of his gift of salvation, and it was the beginning of learning of his daily gifts of grace. So if we fast forward from there 15 years, the faith story of my marriage, I didn't follow the book. I didn't marry a believer. Should have, in case any of you are going through that exploration process. But here's the testimony. My husband became a believer about 7 years into our marriage. It came through some tough stuff. He lost his brother to brain cancer at the age of 42 with 3 young children. So we faced loss. We faced, as Chris would tell you, we faced the abyss together. And through that process, he became a believer of conviction. That's when our marriage became what it should be, which was a covenant marriage between us and God. It was at that point that we began to together invest in gaining biblical knowledge and being discipled. And we joined a 3-year process at our church to read the Bible from cover to cover in small group and to explore it. I did the girls group, he did the boys group, and then we'd come home and share. I actually liked that. I think there's some real good reasons for that. So over the next 3 years, we started to really put the foundation of biblical principles into our lives and into our home. And it's a good thing because we had 2 babies during that time. Tracy and Katie were born during those 5 years. And I think it's like for many, our deep love and concern for them and their futures really strengthened our faith and made us far more intentional about going to church, educating them in the Bible. We had something we called family meeting on Sunday night, and we taught faith lessons after dinner. We tried to make it a dinner the kids liked so that they'd be excited about the faith lesson. Some of our faith lessons ended up with eggs splattered on the wall. That was a very creative faith lesson about faith, but the egg broke. It wasn't supposed to. So we tried to, at every opportunity, instill values and belief systems in our children and lead them over time to a belief in Christ. And frankly, that process is one of the ways Christ has been giving us gifts year after year after year. There's nothing like seeing him work in your children. So, for those of you about to nod off, because this is a story of a nice girl who grew up in a nice family with a lot of nice believers in it, we're now going to go to part 3. This is the juicy stuff. Trials, thorns, pestilence, locusts. This is the fun stuff. I've noticed that when I get introduced by nice people, they always say a lot of nice things, and it's obvious that I've had some success. So I think it's super important to set right next to that introduction a few things that aren't as evident, and those are the thorns and trials that have strengthened my faith in Christ. We don't have time to cover all of them. I'm going to talk about 4. Okay. First, a thorn. This one always catches people off guard. I have an anxiety disorder. That usually isn't well understood because I'm standing in front of a crowd talking to people and they go, well, how would you do that? It really has nothing to do with fear of speaking. It's an involuntary physical anxiety that usually wakes me up in the middle of the night, not during a speech. But it creates havoc in your life. It makes your blood pressure rage. It makes you incredibly uncomfortable in certain situations. It's an irrational fear. It has all kinds of fun traits. And I'll tell you, I've been to all the doctors, and I've looked at all the medications and all that stuff, and I'll just tell you that it's a thorn just like Paul's. It's going to be with me my whole life. I've given up trying to get rid of it. But what it's taught me is that on my own power, I am useless against it. I'm ineffective against it. But with Christ, it can be overcome. And it keeps me, importantly, on my knees and before him because it's on his power that we deal with this thorn, not mine. Trials. I'm a breast cancer survivor. Just statistically, I'm betting we have some others in this room. It's not so unusual. I was 45 years old when I was diagnosed. My daughters were 15 and 10. And if any one of you have experienced cancer in your own life or in someone close to you, you can attest that there's like this tsunami feeling of emotion that rushes over you. And it makes you think about things like, oh my gosh, I'll never be at my daughter's wedding. Some very emotional stuff rises up. And the emotions are far more difficult than the disease. They have pills for that, but the emotions are what you wrestle through as you experience cancer. And you wrestle with some very important God questions. I was real clear that God had picked my birth date. I just hadn't really cleared up that he also picks my death date. Okay? Cancer does that for you. It reminds you have no control over that date. It's not yours. You don't get to pick it. And whatever you were thinking about, that was Looney Tunes. Okay? God's in charge of that date too. When I got that through my thick head, it was a way for me to understand once again that on my own, up against cancer, I'm powerless. But with Christ on my knees, I have all the power I need. I still don't know what my death date is. God does. But I'm okay with it. I've wrestled through that, and it keeps me very humbled to know that God will decide that when it's his time. And he's given me 11, 12 good years. Third trial, this is one kind of the more normal life things. I've been fired, and I would like to tell people that because maybe you've been fired. It's really not one of the more fun life experiences. And like most people, I didn't wake up that morning thinking it was going to happen. And I had had a lot of success in my life, probably didn't think I could get fired. Certainly thought the guy who did it was a crazy man. But I was the president of a public company, so I was not only fired, it was in the newspaper that night. Okay, my children had to read about it, and that just was not all that fun. And so here I was thinking I was in my pinnacle career experience. I was feeling a little bit of that haughtiness that you get when you're in your pinnacle career experience, and found myself instead put out to pasture. I'm really glad about that. It was a wonderful God-given experience because, again, I was powerless over that outcome. But with Christ, I've overcome it on my knees, humbled before him. Really glad it happened. The last trial could take 25 minutes, and there's a timer that says we don't have time for that, but you should know that our third child is our largest life trial. Her name is Katya. We adopted her as a teenager from Russia. We believed that somehow we would just be able, because she's a girl and we raise girls and we love children and we love having a house full of girls, that something good would come from that. But we've found a very rough road with Katya. Her real emotional wounds that come out of physical and emotional abuse that would scare any of you to read about, they're not healable on our power. We can't overcome them. She can't overcome them. The damage is large and deep. And on our own, we would feel completely failures as parents if we measured ourselves by the world's standards, because we've had little impact on this child. And she's rejected our family. She's left our home. I don't think she's coming back, but only God knows. But I'll tell you what, it has kept us on our knees. We're in year 8 of our life with Katya. And it's a gift. It's a gift. If anybody thinks you're in charge of your children, you're wrong. Any children. And this has been particularly helpful to learn, that we are not in charge of the destination for Katya. We are in her life for a season. We're not sure what God has planned with her. We're pretty sure it is, though, his plan. And he has dominion over her life just as he does ours. And so probably the biggest lesson of that trial is to let go of her. Just as in the Bible when I take Isaac to the mountain and lay him up there, it's pretty much what we have to do with Katya. And it's an amazing experience to try to force yourself out of your control behavior and let go of that child and trust God. So this is the good part, right? The trials and the thorns, and you have different ones, but you have them too. They bring us to our knees. They bring us beyond our human capability. The only option is to surrender to our Creator. And then we fall on our knees and we declare him King, which is the whole point, right? We declare him King. That is my favorite set of gifts from Christ, the thorns and the trials. I truly believe that 2 Corinthians 5:15 kind of says it all for me. He died for all, that those who live should no longer live for themselves. I love those words, no longer live for themselves, but for him who died for them. So if Christ was willing to die for us, that we would no longer live for ourselves, but instead live for him, to me, that's our marching orders. Thorns and trials brought me to the end of myself, and I began taking God's plans and purposes a lot more seriously. So the key is realizing that you're part of God's plans and purposes, not your own. And you've heard these words before, and if I've met you, you've heard them before, because I love what Rick Warren says in the first paragraph of The Purpose-Driven Life. And I don't think it would hurt to read it every day. He says simply, it's just not about you. The purpose of your life is far greater than your own personal fulfillment, your peace of mind, or even your happiness. It's far greater than your family, your career, or even your wildest dreams or ambitions. If you want to know why you were placed on this planet, you must begin with God. You were born for his purpose and for his purpose. So that brings me to the fourth part of my faith walk, and that is my faith in the workplace. Because God has my full attention, he's given me very specific work to do. He's given me a calling to serve him in the workplace. He's helped me understand that he is short-staffed in the workplace. As Christians, we spend a lot of time talking about church and very little time talking about work. We talk a lot about faith on Sunday. We don't talk so much about Monday through Friday. And God is concerned about that. And he's looking for us to understand that our Christian walk is Monday through Friday. And that, too, is a place where our work for him can impact generations and generations to come. There's a theologian at Princeton named Max Stackhouse. And this quote just sings for me because he says, business leaders are increasingly the stewards of civilization. Wow, that's big. The stewards of civilization. So you read on and he makes a very compelling case. He says just these few words: families split, but companies endure. Governments fall, but firms expand. The steeples of churches are dwarfed by the towers of industry. People say today they learn more at work than they did at school. The company reaches across cultures. It transcends the boundaries of nations. It serves as the predominant form of organization for many social institutions. In short, when business teams come together, they produce some product or service desired by some segment of the population, and they produce and distribute it peacefully, voluntarily, and cooperatively. That's exciting work. That is exciting work. The thought that business leaders are increasingly the stewards of civilization just rings very true to me. This past spring, we have restaurants all over the Middle East. This past spring, doing business in the Middle East was difficult. It was difficult for our team members. We have members that live in Syria, live in Egypt, and live in Kuwait, live in Jordan today. And I was struck by this point that business is so important in our worldview today, to be a steady hand, a steady force, a set of values, a set of influences, a set of behaviors that might transcend governments. You know, we might be talking about world peace. I'm not Miss Universe, so I won't go there. So I've become really passionate about this topic of the importance of business leaders taking their jobs seriously and developing the next generation of competent and moral leaders. Our cultures, our business schools are not doing their job. We have in our culture this Donald Trump type CEO look, right? You know, you can watch it on TV. You can learn to be mean and miserable and say the words "you're fired," okay? That to me is the wrong model. It may be entertaining, but it's the wrong model. So I've become very intentional in encouraging everyone whose life I come in contact with to ask them to take up this cause of developing the next generation of leaders. That explains to you what I'm doing at Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen. I'm a leader of a 40-year-old company, and we are transforming the culture and the kind of leadership to be competent and character-based leaders for the future. That is, our purpose statement says we are going to inspire servant leaders to achieve exceptional results. That's what we're doing. And then we have 6 principles that demonstrate the types of behaviors we want to affect in our business. That has been an incredible experience. God is not disappointed in any fashion. When you take His word and put it to work in the model for leadership and how you develop leadership, He will bless your work. The last 5 years have been the pinnacle career experience. Absolutely. It could stop today and I'd be happy as can be, because it's been a brilliant testimony to what happens when you operate in business with a set of moral constructs and a belief system that drives how you grow and develop your leaders. Those principles and behaviors that we're teaching at Popeyes, and we call it servant leadership, which frankly even that word scares a lot of people. But we're teaching what the behaviors of humility look like. We're teaching what the behaviors of personal responsibility look like. We're teaching what the behaviors of listening to other people and exhibiting care and attention to them look like. And this has been the foundation for what's blessed our business. We now have 4 years of industry-leading results. That's not an accident. And it's not my doing. It's the principles by which we've done business and the kinds of leaders we put in place to grow our company. We're a franchise model, so owners run our restaurants. Our relationship with those owners tell the whole story of the turnaround of Popeyes, because we love them. We care about them. We want them to make money selling chicken. We want them to be able to use this business venture as a way to put their kids through college and instill values in their families and grow leaders. So to watch God bless our work, because the emphasis, the syllable we're focused on is the kind of leader we're trying to develop, is amazing to watch what God will do with that. Our stock price has doubled in the last 12 months. Go figure. I don't know anything about stock price. I don't know how it works. I don't know why it does what it does. But, God must, because He made something really cool happen. So it is a business strategy, too. I always say when I talk to Christians, I talk about competence and performance results. When I talk to non-Christians, I talk about Christian principles, right? So I'm talking to Christians, and I will tell you that if you do God's work, He can bless it with amazing financial performance that surprises your competitors. I had a fast food restaurant chain CEO walk up to me last week and he said, "I can't figure out what you're doing." He just said it that way. He just said, "Cheryl, I just can't figure out what you're doing." And I laughed and I said, "You're right, you can't." Okay, so I want to spend the last few minutes that we have together. How many do we have? Okay. I want to give you a little work theology to contemplate, okay? This is about giving you something to take back and think about. I want to encourage you to develop a theology of why you go to work, a purpose for going to work. You are leaders in some kind of business setting, consultant, entrepreneur. It doesn't matter how you serve. You're serving. You're in a place of influence. It doesn't matter what your title is. Everybody is a leader. You have influence. God can use you where you are, but you really need to figure out how God uses work to move forward His kingdom. I didn't have a theology of work until I was 40. If any of you are younger than that, I encourage you to get one sooner. Because I don't remember anyone really talking about the purpose of work in a spiritual sense. I didn't hear any sermons about it. I didn't hear my minister going, "Yay, good job at work," None of that. And if I'd been pressed and asked, I probably would have said, work's, kind of a necessary part of life. It's probably because we ate the apple and therefore we have to work. But I didn't think of it as being in the centerpiece of God's kingdom and His purposes. So I had to read. It really just proved that I hadn't explored very much. There's some great books like Your Work Matters to God, great title, great book. Business is a Calling, Work in the Examined Life by Michael Novak. Os Guinness's seminal book about the calling, finding and fulfilling the central purpose of your life. What these books did for me is they drove me to the Bible. And they drove me to the Bible to figure out what the Bible says. And the Bible has over 300 references to work. The word avodah, which is Hebrew for work, also means worship. And I'm just thinking, if God called work worship, it must be important. It must be important. I'll share just 3 biblical references that are part of my work theology. The first is in the beginning. It's Genesis. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy because he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. It helps me to know that God works. He obviously did an amazing and profound work in creation. Work must be valued by God. Second one, Proverbs 31 for the women and the men. A woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Men and women, I think God does praise us for our work. He does see it as valuable in his eyes. He's looking for what you've done, and he wants to celebrate your contributions. And that was a new concept for me, that God might be that excited about how we serve him in the workplace. And then Colossians 3:23, a very famous one, but whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as if working for the Lord and not for humans, since you know that you'll receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It's Christ that you're serving. And this is the God is the boss theology, right? God is absolutely the boss. It's him that we serve. It's none other. It's a very freeing principle in the workplace to know that you're serving God. These other people's opinions don't matter quite as much, right? I can speak in front of shareholders and I'm not panicked about their opinion. I can speak to peers and I'm not worried about how I look or how they think about what we're doing because I don't work for them. I don't work for them, and it's a freeing work theology. As you look through the Bible, and whether you're new to the Bible or old to the Bible, it doesn't matter, because every time you go back to the Bible, you will find new leadership stories to draw from. I never get tired of Abraham, Moses, Solomon, David, Nehemiah, Paul, and certainly not Jesus. There are so many parables. Almost all of them are workplace situations. You go through Luke, it's one of the richest places to find those parables. And it just gives me great reassurance to know that God worked through carpenters, through tent makers, through Lydia, through tax collectors, through fishermen. You know, it doesn't matter where you're placed. God uses you and he works through you. These are the things that really drew me to understand the powerful mission field opportunity of the workplace. Going to work feeling called by God is a pretty fun way to go to work. I can tell you I get up pretty charged up about the opportunities I have to work for him. On a daily business, I take it seriously. I love the opportunities that have been presented to me. And yes, I work way too much, but I work for him and for what he's asked me to do. So I hope that in those words, I've encouraged you to examine just how important your work is for God. To take all those trials and thorns, and those are your boot camp experiences that God has used to prepare you for leadership in the workplace. So don't look lightly upon them. Draw from them. Bring them to the formation of your purpose and approach to work. And then keep the Bible real close every day, right? Every day that I remember to be immersed in the Word is a day that I better serve God. Those are the things I really wanted to lay on your hearts today. There's a lot of good reading material available to you to help you form your approach to work. A couple of my favorites right now, I think it's a God thing that Ken Blanchard and Colleen Barrett wrote, Lead with Love. I think it's a God thing that Joel Manby here in Atlanta wrote, Love Works, essentially 13 chapters on the teachings of Corinthians on love and how you apply them in the workplace. It might be very counter our culture to lead from a loving perspective, but I have seen it be a powerful, powerful approach. Caring love, tough love, honest love, persevering love. When you go to work and express love in the workplace, you may be touching lives that have never seen love any other place. Maybe the only place they ever experience the caring hand of God through your presence and your touch. So I say to people, you can say all day long that you want to be a servant leader, but you can never claim that you are one. As soon as you say that, someone will point out a fault, right? So humbly, I encourage you to be a leader, leading like Jesus every day of your life, aspiring every day to be more like him, never perfect. And then God's people who he entrusts to you in your sphere of influence, they will be better off for having known you. I thank you for your attention today and the blessing of being with you. And if you do have questions, I will be hanging around here for a few minutes and happy to talk with you. Thank you.